Okay, so the big beautiful bill was just signed a few hours ago, and it's now going to be expected to be on Donald Trump's desk in just some time tomorrow around 4th of July. And today we're going to be going over what are the major changes that's going to be happening to both the healthcare field and the medical field as a whole. So let's get into it. First of all, the biggest changes are going to be happening to Medicaid, where we're soon going to be starting to notice that adults aged 19 to 64 without a disability or children now must work, volunteer, do job training, or have some sort of school attendance during that time. Now, the total amount of hours is going to be about 80 hours per month, which makes it about 20 hours per week. Now, for those of them who don't meet it and are not disabled or don't have children or dependents, they're going to be unavailable to have access to Medicaid as a whole. Now, if you are an adult with children age 15 and older, you will also need to meet these work requirements now moving forward. Furthermore, they're changing the re-enrollment policies. So initially you could re-enroll only once a year. Now they're doing it once every 6 months, but it means that you also have to show further proof of things like income, updated proof of residency, and you have to re-enroll in it every 6 months, meaning it's a little bit more difficult to get your insurance because you have to make sure your paperwork is in order twice a year now instead of once. Secondly, you're not just automatically re-enrolled. So before it would just automatically put you back into the system. Now you have to re-update your information into the system every single year. And the enrollment period is slightly shorter by about 1 month. So instead of the few months you got before, you now only have, I think, about 2 months in order to get all of your information down for. So those are the major changes in regards to an individual who are enrolling in Medicaid. But there's also now expected to be changes to how Medicaid is going to be interacting on a state-by-state level. So moving forward, there's now expected to be penalties for states that are deciding to cover undocumented immigrants inside the United States. So now, if a state uses its own money to cover undocumented immigrants on Medicaid, the federal government's now going to be reducing the reimbursement rate from 90% down to 80%, meaning that they're going to have to take the money out of their own state and now put it back into Medicaid in order to get funding. So if they initially were spending $100 billion per year on Medicaid, and if the federal government decides to say that they are supporting undocumented immigrants through Medicaid, they're now only going to reimburse them for $80 billion when before it was $90 billion, meaning the state has to find that money somewhere. These are things through the FMAP. This means that the federal government is going to pay less of the Medicaid cost for the state entire expansion population. So it's not just for overall the adult population that are undocumented, it's for anyone in the population, meaning it's much more expensive for states. And this change is expected to start impacting them effective immediately. Now, we're going to be talking about the changes in regards to taxes and the rural hospitals. So now that there's expected to have lower taxes on the hospital, what's happening is that states will have to lower the tax they put on hospitals and healthcare providers. So initially at the end of every visit, a certain percentage, typically 6%, was taken from providers in healthcare in order to help pay for these Medicaid services. That 6% is now being changed down to 3.5%, but it's not going to be happening immediately. It's going to be happening in 2032. Now, a lot of people were very upset about this, so to make up for it, they added in at the last minute a fund of $50 billion to help them afford the changes to this over time. Specifically SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Same thing, derived for individuals who are typically low income and need help getting food onto the table. They're now going to be requiring the same work requirements that they have for Medicaid. So starting in 2028, anyone who is considered able-bodied and between the ages of 18 to 49 without dependents must work, volunteer, train, or be part of schooling at least 80 hours per month to continue to keep their benefits. Very similar, because usually one person who was on SNAP was usually on Medicaid as well, because they're typically for people who are considered low income. The new issue that's going to be happening with SNAP is that they're changing the amount that states may have to pay based off the amount of errors there are. So of course there are some errors in the system due to improper filing and other issues. And so the federal government has now said that states with high error rates in this program will have to pay between 5 and 15% of the total cost between 2028. This is their way of trying to reduce the amount of waste or the amount of improper validation in the program in order to help reduce costs, but it's also going to put more pressure on states in order to get the situation figured out correctly and in a timely manner. But again, this specific changes doesn't start happening until 2028. Now, if we go on from just the SNAP program, they are making changes to the pharmacies. The pharmacies have been a big area of controversy through things that are considered the middlemen. They're called BPMs. So what was happening was is that they would buy the product from a pharmacy for, let's say, $50, and then they would then sell it to the insurers like Medicaid for something like $80, and they would collect the difference of $30 to pay themselves. The new changes to the bill are now saying that these pharmacy middlemen will no longer be able to charge more than what pharmacies charge Medicaid. So now they're no longer able to charge the $80 to Medicaid. They have to charge the $50 that it initially cost to purchase, trying to help reduce the overall cost of what they're spending. They also must pass the exact cost to Medicaid plus a small fee. Lastly, they're making small changes to Planned Parenthood, where they're no longer going to be allowing Medicaid and the Children's Health Insurance Program to fund organizations like Planned Parenthood and other ones similar to it, meaning that there's going to be an impact on the amount of care that these people receive, and they'll often have to find other groups outside of that to do it. Now, these are all the major changes that were happening. The biggest concerns for people are the work requirements for Medicaid and for SNAP, as well as the changes to just the overall funding mechanisms and its expectation to make states pay more of their expected share in order to help fund these programs. Now, this bill was passed today and it's expected to be signed tomorrow, so there's not any major changes that are going to be happening over the next day. But as the bill is kind of further understood, individuals are going to have a better understanding as to what is inside the bill, what they're happy about, and what they're not happy about. Until then, I want to know, what do you think is the worst changes about the bill, and what would you personally change about the bill, and what would you make it so that it would ultimately aligned with what you think is going to be best suited for our country? Feel free to leave your comments down below. I'll give you any updates if there's anything to change, but I'll see you next time.